Teal dear, two people have consensual sex? Well, I guess that means he raped her. That is not even an overstatement. That is exactly where this is going. So remove all breakable objects from anywhere within arm's distance of you and strap yourself in, because this one is going to induce a little bit of rage, and is honestly one of the most horrifyingly scary glimpses into the future of where universities could be going in regards to their standards of evidence in cases of sexual assault, or even simply in cases of alleged sexual assault. Colorado State University has suspended a male athlete for years after he was found responsible for sexually assaulting a female trainer, but the trainer never accused him of wrongdoing and said repeatedly that their relationship was consensual. She even stated unambiguously, "I'm fine and I was not raped." That's according to the athlete's lawsuit against the university, which persuasively argues that the university not only deprived him of fundamental due process rights, but also denied sexual agency to an adult woman. Taken at face value, this case appears to represent one of the most paternalistic, puritanical, anti-sex witch hunts ever reported on a college campus. Well, this all sounds like a veritable clusterfuck of stupidity, doesn't it? Let's establish a bit of a timeline of events, and then we'll jump around a few sources to get as much information on board as we can before we discuss this even further. The student in question, Grant Neal's expulsion, stemmed from his allegedly inappropriate sexual relationship with a female student and athletic trainer known as Jane Doe for the sake of the court proceedings. In autumn of 2015, Neal was a sophomore at the university in question. He and Doe became good friends and eventually developed romantic feelings for each other. Sexual relationships between athletes and trainers are frowned upon, however, so they first attempted to remain friends. On October 23rd, they went to the movies together. Afterwards, they kissed and engaged in consensual sexual behavior. They did so the following evening as well. These were not drunken hookups, these were mutually agreed upon encounters, according to the details in the lawsuit. At one point, Neal expressed concerns about giving Doe a hickey, a kiss mark on her neck, because the other trainers might notice it. Doe encouraged him to do so anyway, and promised to wear a hoodie the next day. These and other anecdotes demonstrate Doe's full complicity in the sexual activity that took place, though her statements are even more definitive. The hickey was indeed noticed by another trainer, described as the complainant in the lawsuit. When confronted, Doe confessed to the complainant that she and Dean had engaged in sex. According to the lawsuit, the complainant presumed this sex was non-consensual and reported it to the director of the athletic training program. Okay, so we've got a pretty good vague overview of what's going on here. We have two consenting adults who have met each other as a result of their activities at the university. They have become very good friends and decided that they both have similar mutual romantic feelings for each other. At first, they attempt to resist acting on this, but as time goes on, they eventually yield to their desire. This is completely consensual. They are neither under the effects of drugs nor alcohol during these engagements. As we'll go on to see from some of the other sources that give a little more detail on this, all of these activities are completely above board and totally consensual between two adults. Then a third party, basically hearing about this stuff happening, then decides that this woman was in fact the victim of rape. So let's get a little more detail up in here, shall we? October 23rd, the first date in question, Neal and this woman have gone to see a movie. Afterwards, Neal said the woman performed oral sex on him in his car. In text messages afterwards, the woman told Neal her roommates said they saw us doing stuff, to which he responded, like what? Kissing. Her response was, no, like more than kissing, I'm so embarrassed, not gonna lie. Okay, that all seems pretty clear and self-explanatory as to what happened. October 25th, the female student in question invites Neal to her apartment, saying that she was alone. After a short amount of time, the two students ended up in her bedroom undressed. The two were making sexual contact when Neal said she was very adamant in pulling me close and wanting me to have intercourse with her. At the beginning, when I was lying on top, I didn't have a condom. Neal said the woman said she was not on birth control. I immediately got off her and asked if I should put a condom on, and she said yes. Then we engaged in sexual intercourse. She never said no, and she never told me to stop. Another source reporting on the same day says that on the day in question, Neil had decided to host a barbecue party at his home. An hour and a half before the party was scheduled to start, Jane texted Neil and invited him to her house. Jane was home alone. The two went into her bedroom to discuss their relationship, but decided it was too dangerous for them to be in a relationship at that time. Regardless, the two began to kiss and remove their own clothing. The two eventually had sex. When Neil tried to leave, Jane repeatedly tried to get him to stay, according to the lawsuit. Neil said he didn't want to give Jane a hickey because other players would see it and perhaps think it was from him. Jane told him to kiss her neck anyway, and said she would wear a hoodie the next day to avoid suspicion. So again, this seems pretty clear as to what's going on. These are two consenting adults who really want to have sex with each other. So I think it's reasonably safe to say, with all of this on the table, the idea that this is some sort of forced sexual activity against this woman's will is basically a non sequitur. It's not a thing that's happened. She wanted it, he wanted it, they did it. Case closed, right? Well, not entirely. Enter the grey area. The woman's story of what happened on this night with the consensual sex with the condom varies very slightly from Grant's story, but it contains one crucial little detail, which is actually the detail where I can see why people would look at this story and say, this was rape, even though it quite clearly isn't. The woman told the investigator that Grant was lying on top of me, and I told him that I did not want to have sexual intercourse with him that is unprotected, because I am not on any birth control. Although I told Grant no, Grant ended up penetrating me, and I told him to stop. He stopped and pulled out from me immediately. Grant then said to me that if he used a condom, would I be okay with that? I told Grant yes to the condom. Grant placed on the condom, and we began to have protected sex at this point, which I was okay with. So this is kind of the grey area in this case. You do have, in this instance, a guy penetrating a woman when she kind of doesn't want it, but still kind of does. So what we actually have here is very interesting, because it is technically, actually, the definition of rape. It is penetration without consent. However, in reality, what this is the clumsy fumblings of two people who really want to have sex with each other. You've got two people, they want to have sex with each other, they've gone through the foreplay, they're both naked, and they're currently engaging in non-penetrative sex. This is not an uncommon event in build-up to actual penetrative sex. It is a form of foreplay, along with stimulating genitals with hands or with your mouth. You can also stimulate your partner's genitals and your own by making contact with the genitals that is not penetrative. That is the rubbing of the erect penis against the clitoris, or the clitoris against the erect penis, or both, simultaneously, depending on what position you're in. It's not an uncommon part of human sexual activity. And during this process, which is entirely consensual and a build-up to full-on penetrative sex, this guy's penis happens to have actually penetrated this woman. It seems to be completely accidental. Obviously, she asks him to stop and says, no, you have to put a condom on if we want to do this, and he does, and then they proceed to actually have the sex that they both quite clearly want to engage in. But this little fact here is kind of the big grey area that could actually result in some people perceiving this as a legitimate case of rape. Assuming, of course, that you follow the letter of the law absolutely exactly and make no allowance for pesky little nuances like human sexuality and human behaviour. Fortunately, the next day's events kind of put the rumour that this sex is non-consensual to bed, pardon the pun. Because the next night, this woman comes to visit Neil at his home again, where she engages in consensual sex with him again, and Neil's roommate accidentally opens his door and ends up seeing what is happening.
She's on top of him.
They're engaged in sex.
Yes. You don't come back to your alleged rapist's house and engage in sexual contact with them the night after the incident. I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
Now, I don't claim to be an expert on rape, but given that this is the third time that these people have engaged in sexual contact with each other that we know of, and they are in a situation where she is on top of him, generally considered to be a sexual position where the woman is in more control of the situation than the man, and that this is happening the day after the supposed rape, which was reported by this third-party complainant, and that this is also the evening of the same day where the university has begun launching its Title IX investigation into whether or not this was a rape. All of these factors considered together, I am willing to state with 99.99999999999% certainty that this is not rape, as even the woman herself reports in a recorded conversation that she had with Neil.
I don't think you did any of that, right?
Yeah.
Acting like the typical girl that just got raped, but, I hope you know that I don't think I did.
This was, of course, a conversation that Neil and Jane had after this event had been reported as though it was a rape by this mysterious, unknown third-party complainant. But what is most shocking about this by far was the response of the university to this case. The university actively denying Grant Neil the full knowledge of the charges against him, presuming him guilty from the outset, not even allowing him to cross-examine the witnesses, or confront his accuser. He was suspended on an interim basis before the hearing could even take place. The adjudicator, defendant Roosevelt Wilson, who is named in the lawsuit, even refused to interview witnesses who would have corroborated Neil's account. Defendant Wilson professed that he was in charge of the investigation and would be the only person to declare someone a witness in this matter, according to the lawsuit. The predetermined outcome for Neil was a guilty verdict. He was suspended for the remainder of Doe's time at the university. This is a massive miscarriage of justice. And this case really does, I believe, exemplify and personify the hysteria around the mere accusation of rape on college campuses. Universities being so desperate to show the world how good they are at protecting women that they will throw innocent men under the bus at the mere accusation from a third-party complainant, someone who was not even there. And in spite of the protests of the supposed victim of this crime. Even the alleged victim categorically stating, "I was not raped," was not enough to stop this university from interfering in a legal process where frankly it has no right to be in the first place. And as the result of yet another false rape allegation coming out of a university, as a result, this young man, a medical student with aspirations towards being an orthopedic surgeon, a champion wrestler and football player, has been suspended from this university with no hope of getting into any other university until this is concluded, and probably even afterwards, because he now has the label rapist attached to him for the rest of his life. And yet there are still people out there who will look you straight in the eye without even blinking and tell you that rape is not taken seriously.